Let's talk about James Harden and shift gears here. He's apparently been working out hard this offseason. Take a look at this video. Look at him saying, yeah, let's get at it. Running stairs, looking great. He's got a big decision today with the option decision coming up with the 76ers. And look, this is what Philly fans want to see. James Harden working out, getting in shape. But, Brian, what do we know right now about Harden in this contract option situation?
So we believe that James Harden is going to remain with Philly in a medium-term contract. Probably not a 5-year deal, but maybe a 3-year deal, maybe a 4, depending on the guarantee. But I don't think we should assume necessarily that he's going to opt into that $47 million. And maybe this is one of the reasons why it's coming down to today's deadline. Philly needs to rebuild the depth that they lost in that trade. And if Harden is willing to take less than the max, which it appears that he is going to, he could opt out of that contract, lower his salary down from $47 million for next year as part of a new deal that guarantees him probably over $100 million. And then that would free the Sixers to use their full $10 million mid-level exception. They already made one move last week when they traded for DeAnthony Melton at the draft to support their bench. They could potentially look to sign a guy like P.J. Tucker, but to fit P.J. Tucker on their books, they're going to have to offload some money. And one of the ways they can do it is by Harden restructuring that contract.
See, I think it's fascinating because you're talking about all the parts they could bring in to make Sixers a better team. But I also hang on to the idea of a possible $100 million deal. And I can guarantee you there's people out there who are listening to that and saying, is James Harden a $100 million player?
I think when you look in today's NBA, he is a $100 million player. Now, the difference is 6 months ago or a year ago, he was looking at being a $250 million player, right? And that is not a conversation that anyone is having anymore. But if you look at sort of the going rate for aging starting point guards or aging good point guards, it's somewhere around, $100 million, north of $100 million. Last year, Kyle Lowry got a 3-year deal for $85 million. Like James Harden a year ago, before he hurt his hamstring, was a guy who was in MVP conversations, was considered a top 5, top 10 player in the league. If the Sixers think he's going to come back and be anywhere between where he was this past year, when, by the way, he still averaged 20 and 10, and that player from 2 years ago, then yeah, he's 100% worth $35 million a year or so, which is about what I think this deal could average out at. But that's part of just you have to wrap your head around where numbers are going salary-wise in the NBA as the salary cap goes.
And I will say, Harden potentially doing this, if this is what he agrees to, is a real step forward in him trying to help the Sixers become a better team. Because when he first got traded, Philadelphia asked him to pick up this option, and he didn't pick it up because he was looking to squeeze every single dime. And after the way things
at the time, he was saying, I'm so busy with everything and getting traded, I forgot all about it, basically.
Yes, I was the one who asked him that question. It was an amusing answer.
Yeah, he was worried about switching his cable over, not about the $47 million guarantee. But now it's actually potentially positive that it worked out that way. And if Harden does take a contract that allows the Sixers to do this, it kind of changes the way maybe Philly fans should look at him. Maybe not only in terms of like his production, but also his investment in the team.
Well, certainly if it's to go get a guy like P.J. Tucker, remember, he has a long history with P.J. from Houston. Daryl Morey brought him to Houston, right? There's a lot of shared history there. So certainly it would be an interesting move if he does this to bring his old friend back.
And it's also, you brought up the same thing when you were talking about Kyrie. It's not just about the money. It's about what he's going to do now, what kind of person he's going to be. That's been the thing on James Harden. Houston didn't work out. Brooklyn didn't work out. It would show that he's trying to make Philly work out, which I think is very big. But let me ask this, because I know people are thinking it. P.J. Tucker from that old Houston team, Harden. There's a little bit of talk about Eric Gordon. Is that a winning formula for Philadelphia? Bringing back the Houston 2015 team that couldn't win a title.
I voted for Joel Embiid for MVP. So I think this guy is at the top of the league, and I think Tyrese Maxey has huge growth potential. I think especially when he learns the nuances of the game. And they still have Tobias Harris, which they can use either in a trade for other players or, by the way, while nobody was watching and we were all just shocked at how bad Harden looked after the trade, Tobias had a real strong last quarter of the season that they can potentially build on there. So, I mean, in an Eastern Conference that doesn't have a standout team, Philadelphia is absolutely right there in the mix, especially if we see a James Harden that shows up that looks like the James Harden we saw in Brooklyn after the trade 2 years ago.
The Sixers last year lacked defense, athleticism, rebounding, and toughness. They traded for DeAnthony Melton at the draft. If they add P.J. Tucker, if they do, that addresses all 4 of those issues with those 2 guys. It would be huge pickups for them. And I'm with Brian. You look at the East, these teams are really good. Milwaukee, Boston, Brooklyn, Miami, Philly, they all have flaws. The Sixers make these steps forward. They definitely have a chance to be at the top of the East.
All right, so we'll see. Hey, look, some hope for Philly, not so bad. Now, we're talking about Harden, so I want to go back to the sneaky Hembo time because you guys were talking to each other on the break, trying to figure this out. James Harden, one of 2 players in NBA history to average 30 points 3 times, 10 assists 3 times. Who is the only other player to do that?
Well, on our
I'll let you
podcast,
each get an answer.
on
Go
our
ahead,
podcast, The Hoop Collective, I had to take over the trivia question for Brian because he often forgot about it. So I'm going to answer this question. We did talk about it. I initially thought it might be Russell Westbrook. He didn't score enough. I'm going to go with Oscar Robertson as our answer.
Okay, collectively, that's what you're settling on.
I'm going to ratify Oscar Robertson.
You are correct.
Boom.
Oscar Robertson is the correct answer. Look at Hembo. Oh,
Try again,
he
Hembo.
gotcha.
I felt good about that when I
I
told
think
you.
Hembo was thinking we're talking so much about Westbrook that you guys are going to fall for it.
Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.